Today, we're looking at the story of Kendrick Simpson. Now, this is a man who managed to survive one of the worst natural disasters in American history, Hurricane Katrina, only to end up on death row. It's a really complex case, one that brings up some profound questions about trauma, about violence, and what justice really even means. So, how did a survivor become a convicted killer? Let's get into it. This one sentence, man, it just captures the whole tragic paradox of Kendrick Simpson's life, doesn't it? He literally escaped an apocalyptic storm, a true act of God. But in the end, he couldn't escape a man-made system of justice. This idea that the state just finished what the floodwaters started, it really haunts every single part of this story.
So let's start the story right where it ends. We're at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. The date is Thursday, February 12th, 2026. It's early in the morning, and while most of the country is just waking up, a life is being brought to a very, very deliberate end.
And there it is, the final, stark fact. At 10:19 in the morning, Kendrick Simpson's 2-decade-long journey on death row was officially over. But to really understand what led to this moment, we have to go back. We have to go back to the beginning. This brings us to the central question, right? How does a refugee, someone fleeing a massive national tragedy, become a convicted double murderer in a new state? This journey from survivor to suspect, it is the absolute heart of this entire case. Just look at how incredibly compressed this timeline is. I mean, it's wild. In 2005, Simpson loses everything in the flood, flees to Oklahoma looking for safety. Then, just a few months later, in early 2006, the crime that will land him on death row happens. Now, the defense argued that you can't look at these as separate incidents. They believe they were tragically and directly connected. Okay, so here are the undisputed facts of what happened that night. A pretty standard nightclub scuffle suddenly escalates into something absolutely horrific. Simpson leaves the fight, he goes to his car, and he comes back with a high-powered SKS rifle. He then opens fire on a car, killing 2 young men, Glen Palmer and Anthony Jones, as they were trying to leave. The act itself was swift, it was brutal, and it was deadly. So everything, the trial, the appeals, his life, it all hinged on how you interpret that single action. Was it, like the defense claimed, a tragic overreaction? They argued that the horrors he saw during Katrina, his PTSD, had essentially rewired his brain, leaving his fight-or-flight response permanently dialed up to 11, seeing mortal threats absolutely everywhere. Or was it what the prosecution argued? Simple premeditation. They saw a man whose pride got hurt, who made a conscious choice to leave, get a rifle, and come back to kill. For 20 years, these two arguments battled it out in the court system. Simpson sat on death row while appeals were filed and denied over and over. But, his ultimate fate didn't actually come down to some complex legal ruling. Nope, it came down to a simple human vote. Just one vote. Think about that. After 2 decades of legal fights, psychological evaluations, and living in a cage, Kendrick Simpson's entire life hinged on the decision of a single person. It is a chilling reminder of just how thin that line between life and death can actually be. And when the vote came in, it was razor thin. The Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board voted 3-2 to deny clemency. 3 votes to go ahead with the execution, 2 votes for mercy, for life without parole. If just one of those 3 people had voted the other way, Kendrick Simpson would almost certainly still be alive. So that razor-thin vote, it sealed his fate. And that brings us right back to where we started, the execution chamber on that Thursday morning. And in those final moments, 2 very, very different perspectives emerged. Strapped to the gurney, Simpson spoke his last words. He didn't blame the hurricane, he didn't make excuses. He said he was ashamed, he asked for forgiveness, and he insisted he never intended to kill anyone. So does this final act of remorse change anything? Or does it just add another layer of complexity to the man at the center of this storm? But for the families of the victims, remorse doesn't change the past. For them, the whole story about trauma was irrelevant. What mattered was that 2 young men, Glen Palmer and Anthony Jones, were gone forever. The sister of Glen Palmer, who actually witnessed the execution, she felt that after a 20-year wait, the debt had finally been paid. Her words, they represent that profound need for closure, for retribution. And so we're left with this question, right? One that really lingers long after the execution is over. Can a person be both a victim and a monster at the same time? Was Kendrick Simpson a killer who just used his trauma as a convenient excuse? Or was he a victim whose broken mind led him to commit a truly unforgivable act?
The justice system gave its answer with that 3-4 vote and a lethal injection. But the moral question, well, that's for us to grapple with.